Hello, folks. I'm Tarah Wheeler Van Vlack. It's a pleasure to have you back this week. This week I have with us a very special guest. His name is Mike Reinhardt. He's a senior developer and engineer. Right now he works on the Exchange team at Microsoft, and he's in the middle right now of writing the book on technical interviews. He is probably the most skilled interviewer and interviewee that I've ever talked with. He's been a colleague, a friend, an employer, an employee, a colleague of long-standing, and a good friend of mine. And I'm very glad to have him aboard today. Thank you so much for being here, Mike. It's great to have you around.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Yes.
Just one clarification, I don't work in Exchange anymore, but I am still at Microsoft. So
that's very happy. So you succeeded in yet another set of technical interviews. I'm okay with that. That works. All right, so folks, if you'd like to ask questions of Mike, we're going to have a brief conversation about what constitutes the great traits of technical interviewees. Then we'll open it up to questions. You're more than welcome to ask them. Use the questions and answer application here in your Hangout, or just ask me questions at the Twitter handle that you see below you right there, @Tarah. All right, so Mike, what is the worst thing you ever saw anyone do in a technical interview, and you better not tell stories about me?
Ooh, the worst thing I've seen people do in a technical interview. Most of the time, the worst thing someone can do is get extremely emotional. And this can happen pretty easily if you get flustered, frustrated.
Okay.
The most common thing I see people do when they get really flustered and emotional is they shut down. Right? So they can't do the things that they're normally capable of doing because they're in that fight or flight mode. It can get a lot worse. I haven't seen anyone get violent or anything like that, but mostly it's just shut down. They shut down.
Okay, fair enough.
If you're not talking, they cannot evaluate your skill sets.
That's fair enough. All right. What's the best thing you ever saw someone do in a technical interview?
Oh, wow. Okay, that's a hard one to answer.
Okay, well then let me ask you instead, how about you just describe what you think a technical interview should be like, what the best traits are of the people that you interview, and just take a couple minutes here and talk about what you think people should be doing.
So the truth is, when you're interviewing somebody for a technical job, if you don't have any ulterior motivations, which I would love to say doesn't happen, but does, it's a good example of a technical interview. You're really trying to find out if they're going to be a good contributor to your business, whatever your business might be. So in the case of working for a large firm, your team that you work for, you want to make sure that they're going to contribute well, that they're going to have a lot of positive effects on the team, that they're going to help you do better. So what you're trying to do, really, in the most general sense, is evaluate whether they have both the skill sets and the social skills needed to interact with your team well and to help you accomplish your goals.
Okay. What do you mean by social skills?
Well, we're all working as team members, right? So whether you can, those old days of, throw the pizza and beer in a corner with the developer and let him code by himself, we just don't work that way anymore, right? So if you have the most amazing technical skills in the world, but you can't interact with other people, you're going to have some problems in there. And so that's part of the interviewing now, is that you actually can get along with your team, because it detracts from their performance, it detracts from your performance if you guys don't get along.
Okay. All right. What's the worst kind of social mistakes that you see people making in technical interviews?
So if you can't get along with the person that you're interviewing with, then they're really going to assume that you aren't going to be able to get along with their team, because they at least assumedly get along with their team. Right? So it's okay to stand your ground. It's okay to be right and for them to be wrong. And those things are okay, but it's not okay to get really argumentative and upset if things aren't going your way. Okay. Essentially, if you act childish or, again, getting back to that, this would be kind of the negative sides of that emotional. Some people shut down, some people get argumentative, they get excited. If you get really argumentative with whether you're right or not, if you're really argumentative, then that's going to be a very big faux pas in the interview.
I have the feeling you've got some really good stories in there. Why don't you tell us a couple of good stories about technical interviews you've been in and participated in?
Well, I'll tell you about, I'll do the self-humility thing. I'll tell you about one of my interviews that went very well. I had an interview, actually, I don't think I'll say where, but it was at a large software company in Redmond. And I was interviewing for a position that I had worked before, so I knew I was qualified for it. There was no question about that. When I went through the interview, I had zero difficulty going through the interview. I had no troubles with any of the technical side of it. I thought I got along with everybody, but there was one particular person that I interviewed with who asked me a question, and looking back in retrospect, even though it wasn't my intent, my answer probably came off pretty flippant. Just to get a tiny bit of detail, I solved something with an array, and he asked, well, how could you do this without limitation? And my answer was, everything has limitations. You run out of memory, you run out of disk space, you run out of whatever, you're going to run out of something. But if you want to ask me if I can do it with pointers, sure, I could do it with pointers, right? So the feedback I got at the end of that from the recruiter was, you're not technically qualified for this position. And I was blown away and actually felt bad for a while, and it took me quite a while to figure out what happened. And what happened is that person slammed me because of that answer, right? They gave me a no hire, and they disqualified me, and it was all in how I handled it, not in whether I was right or whether I was wrong. It's possible I intimidated him because my answer was something that he wouldn't have been able to understand or give. It's possible that he just thought I was flippant and didn't think he could get along with me. At any rate, he flat lied about me, and I just have to take that on myself because, again, like I said, a part of your interview is social, right? So, yeah, so that can happen, and I've seen it happen the other way too. I've seen people get very argumentative in an interview. There are a few interviewers who like that. They enjoy that nature, and if you want to work on a team, what your goal is to work on a team where you're arguing all the time. Some people, that's how they work well. If you want to do that, then certainly by all means do that in an interview, but I would say that's probably not the norm.
Okay. What can people expect when they walk into a technical interview for the first time? What do you have to do in a technical interview?
So they're not all exactly the same, but there's some patterns that are pretty similar, and everyone I've talked to has followed these patterns in just about every tech company that they've worked for. They're going to have the same things that they ask in any interview, which, the social questions are trying to see if you're a social fit. They're going to ask you about something you're proud of. They're going to ask you about something you could have done better. They're going to, these are the typical things. But the thing that you'll find is really the deal sealer in a technical interview is, can you solve their algorithmic question? And it doesn't always come in the form of coding or whiteboard coding, but that's the most common way. Occasionally they will, either in addition or in place of that, ask you some kind of logic question for you to solve. But they're going to want to see how your brain works when you're solving problems, because as a developer, obviously, that's what you spend a lot of time doing, is figuring out how to take a problem and solve it with an algorithm. So the most common way is to let you write with pseudocode up on a whiteboard your solution to these problems. And they'll evaluate how well you do. And it's not just whether you do it right or whether you answer it right or wrong. It's your thought process and how you go through it. I can tell you I've seen people fail an interview by walking up and writing the right answer on the board. I've also had that.
Explain that.
So I've had that experience myself as well. I walked up on a board and someone gave me something that wasn't very challenging, and I literally wrote down the code, just wrote it right out on the board. And I did not do well on that interview either. And the feedback I got was that they would expect someone of my level to spend a little more time thinking through the algorithm. And it turned out it was so simple I didn't think I needed to. But they wanted to see that thought process, right? So they're trying to evaluate how you think about a problem, not just do you know the answer to this problem. So one of the mistakes that I think a lot of people make when they're preparing for an interview is they go out and buy all these books that give you the answers to these questions that are commonly asked. And answering the question isn't how you get the job. It's how you think through the answer to the question. Did you come up with something unique that they'd never thought of before? Can they see that you have a good system for approaching these problems and solving these problems? That's really the key. And like I said, if you just walk up on the board and write down the answer, they don't know if you just read it in a book yesterday and you just got lucky and won the lottery, basically, and they asked the exact question that you knew the answer to, or if you really knew how to solve it. And in my case, I actually did know how to solve it, but it didn't matter. The impact that it had on them was that, oh, this guy doesn't, know how to go through this process. It's part of what honed my skills on interviewing was making mistakes like that.
Okay. What's the biggest success you've ever seen in a technical interview? What's the greatest moment you've ever seen, been part of, done yourself, or seen someone else do?
So there have been a lot of successes. It's hard to put a value on that and quantitate what a success is, because to everyone it's a little bit different. And obviously your success in an interview is not just if you got the job. Actually, one of your biggest successes could be not getting a job that wasn't right for you, right? So I will say the biggest success from my goal, the way I put it, is to get the job that's right for you, the job that you're going to love, the job that you're going to do well at, the job that you're going to feel like you're a valued person working at, right? And so the success is when that happens. So sometimes you don't find out if there was a failure until much later. And sometimes you never do find out that you had a success because, like I said, you fail a job interview, meaning you don't get it, but that wasn't the right job for you. You don't know that you actually succeeded, right? But if you get a job and then you find out later on in that job that this really isn't the right job for you and you don't enjoy it and you're not doing well, and then that's not really a big success either. So the best successes I've seen come later on, after the interview process, when you find out that you've got this team that's really working together really, really well, and they're turning out great products, and everyone is working together well, and they come to work and they work late sometimes, not because they feel they have to or they're going to get fired or they're not going to get the rewards they deserve, but because they're really engaged in solving the problems that they're on. So that, to me, is a big success when you have that team that works together that way.
I think a lot of people want to know what the magic sauce is. What is the secret to succeeding at all technical interviews anywhere? And it's the same sort of situation I think you're talking about that I give to people about how to dress for interviews, which is you can change how you dress for an interview, but then you've changed what their perception of you will be. So the person that you are when you walk into that interview is the person you'll have to be all the way through your job. And I'm wondering if that's related to what you're saying here. If you don't have the set of skills, if you're not the person you're presenting yourself to be, is that a bad thing, or is it giving you an opportunity in future to improve your skill set by getting the job and then working from there?
Yeah, so we don't see all the possibilities that lay out in front of us, right? So it's hard to say exactly, but in general, you want to be as close to your best self as you can be in an interview, but not somebody else, right? So it's assumed that you're doing your best and that you're on your best behavior in an interview and that you're going to dress maybe a little better than you dress every day at work, but certainly not completely different than you're going to dress every day at work. Now, I have friends that go on interviews and do perfectly well that wear shorts and a ratty old t-shirt, and that works for them, but they've also been developers for almost 10 years, and their skills speak for themselves, and the jobs they're getting, they don't care what you dress like when you work, but that's not always the case. So for me, I look at it, I want to be safe, so you want to be yourself, but kind of the best version of yourself, the yourself that would go and visit your grandparents, So.
That's a great way to put it, actually.
I don't wear a suit ever to an interview.
Okay.
But I also don't wear, very rarely will I wear, jeans and a t-shirt. I'll wear a pair of slacks and either a casual button-up top or a polo shirt, and that's in the realm of what I wear to work. Sometimes I wear that to work, but sometimes I go to work in just t-shirt and a pair of jeans, right? But it's in that area. It's in the area of how I dress.
What is an instant failure with you in a technical interview? If someone's interviewing with you, what is the insta hell no button for you?
Wow. So I'm a little bit open in an interview process, so for me it would probably be pretty difficult. If you were interviewing with me, I've never had anyone do anything that I would call an instant no. But I will say this: if they show they don't have the technical skills for the job, then I don't even bother trying to see if they're a fit socially, right? So you do have to have the technical skills. You don't have to be a rock star, but you have to show me that you can actually add value to the team. And if you can't add value to the team, why are we talking? I mean, then it's just, well, I just met somebody new and we're just having a conversation, right? There's no purpose to it. There's no outcome. So if you show me without a doubt that you're technically incompetent for the position, then the interview's over.
Awesome. All right, we've got a nice long list of questions from folks here, and some of these get sent to me, Mike, I'll tell you, as emails or as private messages, since they're often people who don't want their name attached to the question based on feedback or based on a public interview process that they might be going through. And one of the best questions I've seen so far is a private question from someone I know is interviewing right now in Silicon Valley, and she wanted to know, she thought she did perfect in the technical interview. She absolutely blew everybody away. She thought she did a great job, but she was given feedback that she was not going to be a good fit for the team. And you and I both know that that's often code for a lot of different things. She feels like she did amazing in the technical interview, and that's the portion at which she was stopped. She was denied past that point. What are some of the things that she could have done? Speculate for me.
So it really would be speculation, right? Because I don't know her situation. I don't know how the interview went. I don't know what went on. Honestly, if you're being yourself and you're doing really well technically, if you think you didn't know the answer to some of the questions, or you didn't know how to solve them, or you didn't do a good job, then you can practice and get better at it. But if you did really well at all that and you think that there's some social reason that you're not taken, move on. Mm-hmm. It's not the job you want. Right? Because if they didn't pick you for some social reason, that's not a job you want to be in. So, because whatever their hang-up is, they're going to have that hang-up the whole time you're working with them too. It's just going to be uncomfortable and not good. Now, I know that some people think the job market out there is tough right now. The truth is, it's not in tech. In tech, I'll give you an idea. Up here in the Puget Sound where I live, right, and where Tarah lives as well, there's over 3,000 unfilled software jobs in the Puget Sound. Mm-hmm. So unfilled, and that number is not changed much. I know Microsoft recently did a bunch of layoffs, right? They announced that, and there's still over 3,000 jobs after that unfilled. So it's there's lots of jobs out there. It's one of those, there's plenty of fish in the sea. So don't get upset about this job, that this is the perfect job. The biggest mistake you can make is the same mistake you can make if you're going to buy a used car. And that's to walk in there thinking, this is the car I've got to have. If you walk in there thinking, this is the job I've got to have, it's going to be hard, right? Because you really don't know that. You're not working that job. You're making an assumption, right? So there's a lot of jobs out there. And until you've had a lot of experience and worked in a lot, it's going to be very difficult. And even then, it's going to be somewhat difficult to figure out if a job is really what you want before you've gone and done it. So don't get upset about an interview going wrong. Interviews are going to go wrong, and you have to be ready to walk away, and you have to be ready to accept when they walk away that it just wasn't a good fit, and for whatever reason. And it might be, and I can tell you what Tarah's alluding to. Given her background, right? It might be that the reason that they turned you down is completely biased and bull. But it doesn't matter, right? You can't do anything about it unless you want to become, if you want to go fight the fight and challenge people on it and make changes in the industry by being, I guess, the right kind of quote would be, if you want to be the Rosa Parks, then by all means, you can do that, but that's not the way to get a job. But that is a way to change things, right? So if you're willing to make the sacrifice to change things, you can do that. But if you want to get the job, when someone just says no, you just blow it off and go to the next one, right?
Very good. Absolutely. That is absolutely the answer to the question, and it's a frustrating one for a lot of people, but the truth is that if they didn't want you at the job, you don't want to be there either. You want to get married to somebody that doesn't want to say I do? So that's the basic answer. And you look for a job that's gonna treat you and your skill set with respect. So if you feel like you did a great job, also make sure that you've got that code up there online so that people can see it, can see that you've got the skill set and the qualifications.
Yeah, the technical skill set isn't something that people tend to be married to, right? You're going to change your technical skill set over the course of your career, but who you are isn't going to change all that much. So if who you are is not a good fit for that role for whatever reason, just move on. It's not a job you're going to want.
Yeah, and I've said that on a lot of different occasions, and it just keeps piling up. The more and more people say, if they didn't want you for the job, you don't want to be there. It makes more and more sense every time I hear it. I have somebody here who panics when they see a whiteboard. They feel really uncomfortable and they don't know what to do without their syntax highlighting. Are there any mental mnemonic, yeah, I know, right? Are there any tricks, mnemonics, anything like that that you can give advice for people who are nervous about syntax highlighting? Maybe, I don't know, use different colors of Sharpie marker?
Yeah, so I'll give a shout out for this one. This is why I got into this, right? The reason that I'm helping people get through interviews and that I'm writing a book is because I had this interaction with a lot of people that they would lock up, they would freeze up, they would have trouble on the interview, and these are people I know were very skilled at their job, their bosses, a lot of times. So a real common paradigm is that people will work as contingent staff, either a contractor or a vendor or a consultant, and then if they do a really good job, that they'll hire them full-time. That does still happen. It's not as common as it used to be. But I would see people that were really excellent contractors and vendors, and their bosses wanted them to interview for a full-time position, and they would just not do well on the full-time interview. And it was that reason. They would get nervous, they would shut down, and they wouldn't do well. And I'll tell you, there's two ways that you get over that. One is you learn mental mnemonics to get yourself out of panic mode. So this is psychology. This is not technology, right? A simple one is to control your breathing. If you control your breathing, it will take you out of the panic mode, right? So a real simple one is to breathe, count to 4 on your in-breath, hold for 4, count to 4 as you breathe out, and hold for 4. If you practice that, you can do that almost unconsciously, and it almost instantly pulls you out of the panic mode. And there's a lot of other tricks. By all means, you can talk to a therapist or psychologist about how to get out of fight or flight mode, but most of it is about starting to put your focus into what you're doing. And out of when you put your focus in, it pulls you out of that mode. And the second part, and this one is equally as important because this is what got you in the mode in the first place, practice. If you've never written up on a whiteboard before and you always use your computer and you're reliant on that and you're so worried that they're going to ding you for every little semicolon that you miss, first off, they won't. They want to see that you know how to solve the problem, not that you know how to code without an IDE. Everybody uses IDEs when they code. Right? But if you practice it, you'll be confident that you can do it. So take a friend, they don't even have to be a technical friend, and have them put you through that process over and over and over again until you're comfortable at it. Give them a set of problems so you don't even know what problem's going to come at you. And try it and work it. You know, why is your first experience at an interview in an interview? That's ridiculous, right? The first time you drove a car was not when you got on the freeway. You went and practiced in a parking lot with your parents.
That's a great analogy for it. All right, so now we know that they need to practice. How do you get feedback from people in a technical interview situation? What's the best way to try to elicit information? And often in situations where companies are not permitted to give you any kind of feedback on how well or poorly you did. How do you get that feedback?
So it's not wrong at the end of most interviews, unless you run right up to the border, which does happen occasionally. It's not wrong to ask the person. They'll usually come back to you at the very end of the interview and they'll say, "So do you have any questions for me?" And you can ask them, "Well, do you have any advice for me on solving this problem or that problem or something that you had an issue with, or how do you feel this went?" It's okay to ask those kind of questions at the end of an interview, and you're going to find that it doesn't happen very often. So those people might be a little bit put aback, and so they're not going to be used to that. But that's good. They can give you their feedback. The process for it is that the recruiter, whoever set up the interview for you, gives you all the feedback, that they collect the feedback from them and they give it to you. And they should give you feedback. That is part of the process. But I realize there are certain industries where it's their policy that they don't give you feedback. And if that's the case, there's nothing you can do about that. You're not going to get feedback if their policy is they don't give feedback. I can tell you where I work right now, the policy is if someone calls about me on a new job or from a house, they will answer the facts and only the facts. Yes, this person worked here from this date to this date. That's it. That's all they're going to say. That's their policy, and there's nothing you can do that will get them around that. So, and with good reason, right? Their legal team is the one who told them to have that policy because it opens them up for liability if they say anything, and that thing can be challenged, and that thing caused somebody a monetary setback, then they're liable for that statement, right? So, so you won't get that feedback. So if you want feedback, practice with people who are qualified to give you feedback. And if you don't have those people, Well, that's kind of why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm trying to build a process, and so is Tarah, right, where we can train you how to interview so you don't go in there blind, so you have had feedback. Look, I teach martial arts. You can probably see this black eye that I have right here. So
I thought that was from your last technical interview.
yeah, that's when you get violent. But no, I do martial arts, right? And so one of the things we say is, when's the first time you want to get punched in the face? It's going to happen. When's the first time? On the street?
In an alley. Yeah.
In a dark alley? With the stranger who wants to hurt you? Or would you rather have that be a friend who first punches you in the face in a place where they're in an environment where they're trying to teach you? Because the first time you get punched in the face, you don't know what to do. But the second time you get punched in the face, you're like, oh, I know what that is. That hurts, but big deal. I'm going to live. And you're in control and you're there. So practice. That's the right answer, right? The way you're going to get feedback is get feedback from people who care about you and are motivated for you to do better. You know what the motivation of the person that you're interviewing for is? It's to find a candidate for the job. It's not to make you a better candidate. That's not their motivation. They don't know you. You're not their friend. They don't care about you because they don't know you, right? They might care about you as a person, but they don't care about you as a friend. They don't know you.
All right.
But friends do.
I've got one last question for you, but first I'll ask if you've got any last thoughts, anything that came up that you wish everybody would know. And tell us also when the book's coming out.
The book is scheduled to come out in January. I'm still working on it. And I apologize that I don't have a lot of contact information and stuff like Tarah does, but I'm new to this process. So I've been in the industry for a very long time, but I'm just starting to open up and teach others what I've done to be a success so that they can be successful as well. But the main thing is, there's two things that I covered today that I think are really, really important based on the questions I can see that they are, which is don't get hung up on this is the perfect job for me. Really, really important. Don't do that. You have no idea what the perfect job for you is until you've done it. So be open, and be willing to move if it's not right for you, right? And the second is practice. Those two things are probably some of the most important. If you practice, you'll be comfortable at it and you'll be good at it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mike. I really appreciate it. This was a wonderful experience. I know we're looking forward to having the book come out. Thank you again, and we'll hope to see you folks all here this coming week. And I've got several special guests lined up for the rest of the year. I think you're going to very much enjoy it. We're going to tackle some major issues like ageism and technology. It's going to be a great time. Thanks again, Mike. We'll put folks in contact with you who are interested in the book, and we'll talk again soon.
Great.
Thank you.